Boom.
Boom. All right. Welcome to today's episode. I'm here with Kurt Yazija. I just wrote an awesome book called The Carnivore Diet. I am extremely excited about this episode because I love meat and I love business. Kurt, how you doing? Welcome to the Growth Podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kurt and I have been chatting here a little bit before we jumped on and get to know each other. And I'm very excited for this for many reasons, man. But before we jump in, can you just tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I just wrote a book on the carnivore diet. I've been a CEO for 6 years. I've got two companies now. My first company is still chugging along, sort of cruising, if you will. And I've got a big team that runs affiliate traffic. So we do a lot of Facebook advertising and we sell a lot of products doing Facebook media buying. So that's kind of where I got my sort of start, if you will, in the entrepreneur space. I did that, built that company back in like 2014 when I kind of left corporate world. My background is in engineering. I was an electrical engineer, and then I went to Microsoft, and then I went to Zillow. I lived in Seattle most of my life, and then I went to New York. And the carnivore diet was sort of this idea that I got into with my whole like sort of biohack optimization. I'm not really a biohacker, if you will. I think I'm more of kind of like an ancestral alignment or optimizer that focuses on aligning to like our roots. And so I'm looking a lot more at like, what can I remove? Not like which supplement can I add to like make myself the most optimal, and just try to dial in this sort of like core tenets we have in our health, right? Like getting light, optimizing our sleep, making sure our diet is not putting a bunch of noise in our body and triggering us in bad ways and just harming us. And so these things are massive levers in my experience. I come from having pretty bad anxiety, and so I talk about that in the book that I wrote. And it kind of ultimately led me to a level of having depression and having a panic attack and creating some trauma. And so when I sort of started to learn about all this, and then I discovered the carnivore diet, it really gave me a foundation. And so it wasn't necessarily a journey that I was dealing with the mindset as much as it is, and mindset is a big piece of it, but I think diet is a huge aspect of our sort of emotional resilience and our physical like ability to handle the stress of being an entrepreneur. Because in today's world, we're dealing with so much, and it's shiny object syndrome everywhere. There's so many opportunities, and it's all about kind of focusing in, right? And picking something. And so Crush for Ties is my existing company, and OptiAlign is the new company that I'm working on. I kind of envision it sort of like an on-it nutrition type business where I want to be someone who is an influencer in the space around ancestral optimization and optimal alignment with our ancestry. And so I eventually want to maybe look at different supplements and consumable things that I can produce. But right now I'm just trying to focus on my deep understanding of sleep, of movement, of energy, and of like the diet, which is really what the carnivore diet is all about. So that was a longer probably answer to your question, but I think that's a good sort of place to start.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to start, man. That's awesome. You've been on a cool journey. Eh? So you went from corporate. I also went from corporate and transitioned into this space. Um, and let's talk just for a second about that, because I know that the audience, like myself and yourself, probably came to a point where you were like, fuck, no, I want more, or this isn't for me, or I see opportunities everywhere and I want to explore kind of other avenues, right? I want to grow. Um, Talk a little bit about that transition, if you would. What kind of struggles did you feel, or how did you feel emotionally going through that?
Man, that is a growth process for sure. I mean, I think one of my stories that I talk about in the book is kind of being outgrown by the business that I started. So I had a lot more shit than I could handle, and I wasn't at a level of skill set where I knew how to process all the stress and all the problems I was dealing with. And I've seen some of the big thought thinkers talk about this too. Like if you earn wealth, it's one thing to like make money. It's another thing to keep it. And I saw this in my business. I would make massive jumps one month, make a bunch of money, we would lose it the next month. And it was like, it was painful because you're seeing success, but then all of a sudden you let off the gas or you lose your eye on the ball and problems happen and you're not focused on what's coming down the pipe and you make mistakes. And so it took me a few years to really kind of get a feel for that and get an understanding of the whole concept around complete responsibility for everything in the business, and just, you know, not shifting the blame or making excuses. And I know that sounds kind of like rough and tough and all this, and it can be, and you have to be kind to yourself, but and have compassion for all these challenges. But at the same time, it really is about that kind of full responsibility aspect, and then just understanding and learning and being compassionate with yourself. Because when you start a business, you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know where your skill set is lacking. You want to be great. You want to be successful. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you take a lot of hits and you deal with a lot more challenges. And for me, like the whole, as you can relate, the whole idea of navigating all of that can be quite stressful and scary at times. And if you don't know how to process stress, if your diet isn't optimized, if your lifestyle isn't building the foundation that you need to take on all of this stuff on you, you're in a much worse place. And so I think diet, sleep, exercise, all of this really gives you a foundation to be resilient and to be able to handle that. And so when I think about the emotional stuff, I really do think that we have to be very mindful of everything that's impacting us outside of the work that we're doing, so that we're built up and strong enough to really handle it. Because it's very it's kind of like going to war. You don't want to be sick, or you don't want to be at 50%. You want to be able to take on whatever you need to do. And you know, if I can function at 10 or 15% better, you know what it's like to wake up and get half the quality of sleep that you need. You're like, damn, my day is shot. Like I'm waiting to go back to bed, you know, just to reset the day at that point almost.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Something that I've found in the entrepreneurial journey when I transitioned from working corporate, which was a full on, like, I was a slave and I knew it, and I just did it. I was like, oh, again today, here I go. Like, I could literally do it with my eyes closed. That job in Singapore, for example, I can remember very clearly. I was like a complete zombie, no problem, clock in, clock out, like, oh, unfulfilled. When I transitioned to consulting in Southeast Asia and actually running events and being the point person for everything, I immediately had to change my habits to keep up, to be able to perform. Like, you know, I started running again in the morning on the beach. I changed my diet up. I got back into meditating. I got back into journaling. Just self-development journey kicked into full gear. And it was out of necessity. Actually, it was like, my God, I have to be on point today. Holy shit, how do I get on point again? I don't even remember what on point feels like. Okay, maybe I should run. Yeah, maybe I should write. Maybe I should jump in this cold thing. Oh, okay, maybe I should do this. And all of a sudden I was like, I actually feel pretty good. And then when you stop that, all of a sudden you're like, wait, I need to go back to that now. Right. And I feel like you're so far down the path that you've realized this, you've harnessed it, and now you're looking at various ways to optimize and just be the best human you can be. Right. And I can say, in all honesty, we're sitting here looking at each other. You're one of those people, when you see you, like, I see your social media and stuff. I follow your Instagram, and obviously that's how I reached out to you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You are one of the people who sparkle. Okay. By sparkle, I mean, it's obvious that you're healthy. Your eyes are clean. Your skin is clean. Good posture, right? You're obviously in great shape. You sparkle. You're one of the humans who sparkle. It's very obvious to me. That was exactly why I reached out. Okay. Because I can tell that you're doing something that is optimizing your being, which is awesome. So that's very cool, man. I love it. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about health and anxiety, because I struggle with anxiety. Most people do. I've had panic attacks and shortness of breath and all this stuff. I've had gut issues. I've had ulcers and all this stuff. Talk to us a little bit about what do you think the biggest problem people have with just overall health? If you could sum it up, like, what's the biggest underlying issue that society has then we can go deeper into the little segments. If you could just, if you were on top of the world and they said, hey man, what's the biggest problem here? You have 1 second to tell me. What would you say?
Probably stress.
Stress. Yeah. And
People in
then,
resistance, right, to
yeah,
whatever's happening in their world.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
then I would add refined sugars, refined carbs.
Yep. Stress, refined sugars, refined carbs. So for the listeners who aren't quite as up to speed on the health stuff, myself included, like, can you define a refined sugar and a refined carb versus, I guess, an unrefined sugar and unrefined carb? Like, what's that actually mean?
So yeah, so refined would just mean more processed. And so any food that's refined, when you put it in the human body, even refined red meat can can hurt you, or refined animal fats like processed beef tallow, for example, can cause gut issues and can make people sick with more allergic reactions. So whenever you're processing food and you're taking it away from the source and you're spending more time aging it, exposing it to bacteria, to changing the molecular native source of it, you are refining it. And so when we look at refined foods, the majority of the shelf items in a typical supermarket are going to be processed to last a really long time and to create an addictive flavor profile for humans that is not ancestrally consistent with the majority of what our diet was probably consuming. And so that's the refined aspect of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's crazy, right? Like, if you think logically, just for 1 second, I know it's hard, people, but let's just be logical for 1 second. Our bodies have been doing this thing called life for how many thousands of years, right? And in the last, what, like 100 or 200 years or whatever, these big brains have developed and we're like, oh, wait a minute, I think we should start eating plastic. And like, and then like, obviously the body's like, oh my God, please stop. What are you doing to me? Um,
Yeah.
right? Like, it logically, it just makes so much sense to be on an ancestral type diet. Now, we're here talking about the carnivore diet, which is meat-based foods. Okay. Now, we talked about this before going on. I grew up as a hunter. My dad's a hunter. I eat meat every day of my life. I love it so much. My wife, on the other hand, she's not a vegetarian per se. She does eat fish and meat time to time, but she just generally feels better on vegetarian. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because they're both technically ancestral, right? She loves her spinach and salads and stuff. Um, what's the deal, man? Get into this for me, because I want to hear this meat stuff. Because
I
if
love
you
this
if
part
you
of the
can convince me
conversation.
to if you can convince me to eat just meat, I would love nothing more.
Well, okay, so there's a few things here. Let's talk about the anthropology, right? And it's conjecture. So
Cool.
we can't purely go back in a time machine and just see what exactly happened, but we can look at fossil records, we can look at blood nitrogen levels, and we can see some patterns of human evolution. And so when we look at that, there's a few big indicators that lead us in the carnivore community to think that people are really meant and thrive off of eating animal foods. So one of the big things, so if we back up, humans effectively probably evolved from primates around 15 to 20 million years ago. That's what we kind of think. And so we were hanging from the trees for a long time, even once we branched out into the Homo species we early saw in our ancestors. It was about let's see here. I'm kind of pulling up some notes here that I have. It was
Cool.
about, so I want to say around 2.5 million years ago, we saw our brains really just start to explode. And what's interesting is that during that same time, we saw the last ice age we're currently coming out of, the Quaternary period. It's been a period of around 500,000. Let's see here. Actually, it's been around 2.5 million years, where we're actually warming back up from an ice age that we saw start right around the same period of time when we can see fossil records of humans where their brains started to explode. So what really happened here? Like, what's going on? So when we look at humans, we think we left Africa, we think we moved further north, and we left the equatorial regions. And we think that when the environment got cooler, plant foods became less available. The general consensus, if you go to the Arctic or where you live, for example, is you're not going to see a lot of vegetation if you walk outside in Calgary or eastern BC most of the year. What you can walk out and eat as a human being is probably going to be animals, and it's probably going to be elk, caribou. That's what you're going to live off of. If you try to eat the bark, the grass, the vegetation there, the native foods that are plant foods that you see are not going to give you the nutrients you need. And so what we think happened is evolution pre-selected and selected people that developed guts with higher acidity, that developed limbs and the ability to sort of stand upright and become longer and more efficient at actually using tools. So tools actually became a big picture for us, where we think what happened was the early hominids were able to break into bones and remains from animals that were left over from the carnivorous animals that were roaming the lands before, where they couldn't actually get into those bones. So we think one of our biggest milestones as a species was our ability to learn how to use rocks and sharp objects to crack open bones. And once we started doing that, we saw our gut acidity really rise. We saw it go from like a pH of what you would see in like a cow or a primate, typically of like a 5 or 6, all the way down logarithmically to like a 1.5, 1.2, which is what you see with scavengers like buzzards, hyenas, coyotes, in the carnivorous felines, cats that are like lions who eat mainly animal foods. Their pH is down in like the 2 and 3 range. What's interesting is the gut pH, the gut acidity that we carry, is metabolically really expensive. Like to maintain a stomach lining and a stomach acid level at that level would have not been ancestrally like beneficial to us unless it did something. Like, why would we have gut acidity at that level and have to maintain a stomach at that high and acidic level if it wasn't there to really kill off and break down the pathogens in these rotting flesh, the bacteria that was in there, and really break down the protein? Because animals who eat plants are seeing like pH is much, much higher, and it's much easier to maintain that biologically and metabolically. So that's a huge indicator. Now, our teeth probably didn't evolve because we didn't need to change our teeth, because we made tools. We could break open the cuts, we could cut meats, we were using knives, we could actually do that. But what we see is like we got taller, we could see further across the savannah, we became longer, we became more enterprising hunters, and we saw our shoulder structure fluctuate and change from hanging to actually throwing objects. And so that was another step in our evolution. And all the while we're doing this 2.5 million years ago, we saw the humans go from, 15 million years where we didn't really have any change in our hominid species of fossil records of brain size and development, to holy shit, we went way taller, we had longer limbs, our brains exploded from 400 cc's to 1,500 cc's in literally 1.5 million, 2 million years. And we just grew these massive brains, which are full of DHA, EPA, fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids, and cholesterol and fat. And when you look at a diet from what humans consume, you see direct brain deterioration, mental health, and disorders come from people who are vegan and plant-based, because they're missing these nutrients that are not found anywhere in plant foods. They're only found in animals. And so that's a big piece of what we think happened. The environment cooled, plants became very scarce, humans were forced to become scavengers. We then become more enterprising as we got our evolution, and we were able to then hunt animals, and then animals became our go-to food. We still have some of the ancestral mechanisms to eat plant foods, but the type of foods you see, the fruits, the vegetables, the kale, the spinach, none of that was in our environment. Like, we have genetically modified everything you see in a plant-based diet today in a supermarket. Like, you can eat an elk and you can eat everything you need nose to tail from that animal and survive off that animal for 6 months and get all the nutrients you need in every bioavailable form. You cannot go outside and find every vitamin you need from plants that are native to that environment. There are some equatorial tribes that we see, the Catawbans and other environments, where they actually will eat high carb, low fat, and there's low incidences of cardiovascular disease and diabetes, for example. So there are some outliers in the very equatorial regions of places. But for the most part, for most of us, genetically speaking, I don't really buy this idea that everyone's designed differently, that everyone needs a different diet. I think in the case with your wife, what's happened is she's probably, her gut microbiome isn't adjusted to handle meat, because I can eat like a 2-3 pounds of steak and go running 30 minutes later. I couldn't do that when I first started eating carnivore. And you need to give your body weeks of eating a certain type of food so that the bacteria can shift and that you can actually get used to it. But I see no benefits that you can't get from animal foods. And there's a whole slew, Aaron, of anti benefits from eating plant foods. We can talk about spinach and the oxalate load and what that does to your thyroid, what that can do to your kidneys. A majority of kidney stones are now from oxalates, crystals that are formed and deposited in the body. And these are microscopic thorns in plants that are quote unquote superfoods like spinach and kale. And they also have cyanide in them. They're isocyanates. So they create a cyanide mechanism. And what we think is also there, and stop me and cut me off if I'm rambling too much here, but what we think is also there is plants didn't evolve and build as a species on this planet to be eaten as a perfect superfood for other predators. They actually evolved their own mechanisms, but their mechanisms are different than animals. Animals can claw, they can fight, they can run, they have an ability to escape their predation. Plants are stuck in the ground. They're fucked. Like if you go there, it's like sticking in the sand and your head is sticking out of there. People are going to chomp on you. Like you need some mechanism of defense. And so they develop toxicity. And what we've seen in modern superfood industries now is that we are talking about these plants and their toxicity. And we're saying these toxic components of plants, things like polyphenols, resveratrol, isocyanates, sulforaphane you see in like broccoli sprouts with like Rhonda Patrick. These components are actually molecules that are defenses in plants. And what they do is they trigger an immunological response in humans. They trigger our body's natural pathways to detox. And they call these plant foods superfoods, but it's like smoking a cigarette. You're triggering your body's natural detox when you smoke a cigarette. But then what's the collateral damage of these molecules? Well, we know, for example, in the case of sulforaphane, you damage DNA. It kills cellular mitochondria. So yes, it can be anti-cancerous, but what do you get with chemotherapy? You kill healthy cells along with the unhealthy cells. And we can get the benefits of living an optimized life, ancestrally aligned, without destroying our healthy cells if we don't put in toxins in our body, if we eat a nose to tail carnivore diet, if we go out and get sunlight, exercise, practice fasting, and get all these other benefits. So don't buy the hype. The plant molecules are there maybe for medicinal purposes in extreme cases where we do have cancer or we need to treat things, but I don't think they're meant to be eaten, and plants certainly don't want to be eaten. And these mechanisms, when you look at their entire equation, they have a much bigger negative, probably net negative effect on human bodies. And personally, I have a huge story of just getting rid of gut issues that I lived with for a long, long time when I took them entirely out and then my gut adjusted and I just went to animal foods. They're much less inflammatory. They don't trigger the immune. And in the carnivore diet space, if you look it up, there are so many stories of people who are reversing chronic autoimmune disease. They're getting rid of so many issues. So it's very interesting time and interesting diet.
Wow. I think you did it. I think you did it. You know, seriously, I wanted to listen as objectively as I could and try to pick out logic, right? Obviously. And the thing that really stood, I mean, you said a lot of amazing stuff there. The thing that really hit home there for me, as I'm looking at the plants behind you, which is oxy, is funny. Um, they're stuck in the ground and they need a defense mechanism not to be eaten, right? It's true. It's like poison ivy makes you itchy if you rub on it, you know? If you eat a rose bush, for example, like the thorns are going to fuck up your throat. Okay, get it. But like on a micro level, okay, what's inside spinach? You're saying there's mini thorns in there that hook on that do shit to your kidneys or something, right?
You can literally die from spinach. If you ate 3 or 4 pounds of spinach in one day, it would probably kill you. It is
Holy shit.
that toxic. But we've genetically modified it. And of course, we're going a little extreme here. Like a lot of plant foods, our ancestors probably fermented, which helps the preparation of the food can make a difference. But there is a lot of toxic load we're putting on our bodies, a lot of stress we're putting on our bodies with these plant foods that is not existent in animals.
Wow. Makes sense, man. It makes sense. And that's not just because I love steak and meat and shit. It makes sense. God damn it. I literally have a small headache right now. You know, I literally am like, oh boy, this is intense.
So I
Yeah.
would add to that because I think a lot of people, when they hear this, they just go, oh, you know, I have to say goodbye to all my spices and all my plant foods and nothing. And I would say a couple things. One, like when I first started this, I was really worried about cholesterol and saturated fat and what it would do for my heart. And there's a ton of stuff we can talk about there if you want. I was worried about missing out on vitamin C and all these different vitamins that you get from plants and phytonutrients. We could talk about that and fiber if we want. Um, it's really interesting when you dive into these and you look at what we've studied and how much of our studies have been healthy user bias. So think about this, the last 40, 50 years, who are the vegans? They're the people that go exercise. They're the people that don't smoke cigarettes. They're the people who are very health conscious. Okay, now if we look at studies of huge populations of people and we go plant-based people versus people who chomp on steaks all day long, what group of people do you think is going to is going to exercise less, smoke less, do a lot more unhealthy behaviors? Of course, it's going to be the meat consumers.
Yeah.
But is it the meat? No, it's not the meat. The meat is really what's keeping them healthy. Because when you take a vegan and you give them fish or high quality grass-fed beef, they get their brain back. They get rid of this anemia. They get mental health disorders go away. And so it's really interesting to think about all those concepts and try to dive deeper into them. And I did that in my book. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm talking here. And I feel confident enough to talk about this is because I spent a lot of time researching it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very well versed on the whole subject. It's awesome, man. I love it so much. It's such a polarizing topic. And that's why I was just so excited to talk. I can talk to you literally for hours about this because it's so interesting to me. Um, okay, so yeah, let's talk about the vitamins and the fiber and stuff, because how does a carnivore get their vitamins, for example, that come from plant that you typically would get from plants, or how do you get your fiber to keep your flowing? And when I hear carnivore diet as a very rookie minded person with this, the first thing I think of is I'm going to be constipated. Okay, I'm going to have a full stomach of meat that's just turning and digesting for hours, and I'm not going to get my vitamins and my nutrients because that's what we've been brainwashed, I guess, to think, right? So that's what I think initially. So talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So fiber is an interesting one. We actually have some studies now that are interventional. So when you look at studies, one of the keys to look at is to delineate between the studies that look at epidemiology, which is this idea that we look at big groups of people and take surveys, versus actually controlling and going, all right, we're going to intervene and give this specific group something and look at this group. The interventional studies are really what's proven. And the epidemiology is the way that a lot of researchers will look at large scale disease and try to then hypothesize to go then test with interventional. So I hope that was clear. A lot of people are being misled by epidemiology. Epidemiology is a root from epidemic, which just means the study of disease in a group. But without creating a real control and really looking at the differences, we can get things, oh, excuse me, we can get things that are, we can get those healthy user biases, those vegans who are in there who are chalking up the plant-based numbers and saying, oh, I'm going to live longer because I am a vegan, when it's really that they're exercising, they're more mindful of their health, they don't smoke, all these other things. So that's a big thing. So fiber, when we look at fiber and we look at interventional studies, again, this is another one of those healthy user bias things, right? Who are the people who historically eat a lot of fiber? It's not the people who go to McDonald's every day and go to Wendy's and don't give a shit about their health. It's the people who are really focused on their diet and lifestyle. And so they understand the value of exercising and all these other massive factors. But fiber, when you look at the human gut, this is where it gets interesting. Our stomach compared to a cow or a gorilla is so much shorter in our intestinal tract. We have very small, long intestines relative to them. We have very minimal appendices, which is oftentimes you just get taken out because, you know, when you have an appendicitis, you'll get whacked out. But these other animals have bigger areas here. And these areas in their digestive tract are actually used to ferment fiber in their bodies. So the way you get energy from fiber is by eating a shit ton of fiber. A cow eats 70 pounds of grass a day. Wow. Like a human does not eat 8, 9, 10 hours a day of grass, or a gorilla eats 12, 10 hours a day of tree leaves. There's very little nutrients when you eat a fibrous piece of fiber. In fact, insoluble and soluble fiber, by definition, you don't get really anything out of them. They just go through your system and they create this fibrous, they're the fibrous part of the plant where you don't extract anything from them. But what the animals that are herbivores and plant-based have is they have massive guts. The gorillas have the big protruding stomachs. The cows have these massive ruminant. Actually, what happens with cows, if you want to get graphic, is they eat food, they puke it back up, and then they chew it again, and it goes back into their second stomach. So they're actually eating and chewing food, regurgitating it, re-chewing it, putting it back in their stomach and breaking down all this fiber. And then it's sitting in their guts, these massive guts that hang down and make them look like they're pregnant all the time. And they're fermenting it. When humans eat fiber, they get bloated. They get constipated. When we remove fiber in interventional studies, and I'm happy to give you the studies that you could reference for the show notes for people, we see gut issues go away. We don't see people actually have constipation. In fact, fiber addition has been linked with constipation. What we see when they add fiber is they just poop more volume, because you can't, as a human being, digest fiber. But pooping more is not necessarily having better digestion. Really what it is when you go carnivore, this is going to sound crazy, you might poop only every 2 or 3 days because it's extremely low residue. So every part of your body, of the food that you're eating, gets absorbed by your body. You don't have a lot of waste that you have to pass through your system, and you don't get constipated. Things start to flow because there's just nothing your body has to really focus on with the fiber. So the fiber is interesting. There's also some arguments that the collagen in animal connective tissue is the animal food source of fiber in our guts, and that our guts treat that on a carnivore diet like fiber. But you don't need fiber to poop, and you don't need it to have a healthy gut. And I can tell you firsthand, I have no problems in that department, and I haven't had fiber for over 1.5 years. Or about 1 year and 5 months. So it's been interesting, but it's definitely been much better in that department.
Huh. That's very logical also. Very logical. It makes sense because, yeah, I mean, I've, like most people, when you go through anxiety or stress or a heavy workload, for example, when I was throwing massive events on the beach, for example, awake for 5 days throwing a party, okay, super stressful. I would find my gut health would really deteriorate. It didn't help that I was having 20 gin tonics a day either, but the way that I would counter my gut health was like I would take fiber supplements. Okay, this is right in line with what you're saying, because it would make me flush things through my body, or so I thought, right?
Mm,
I'd,
yeah.
I'd clear myself out because there was more volume coming through me. And I was like, oh, that it must be good. I'm going to the bathroom more and it's volume. It's like, okay, I'm getting all this crap out of me, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what you're saying is that we just simply don't process it. It's just going through you and out the other end. Whereas meat, carnivore, it's being absorbed by the body, most of it. And so you're actually going less. And yeah, so yeah, that sounds very logical to me as well, you know. um okay, so I saw Joe Rogan. I mean, obviously everyone loves Joe Rogan, he's cool as hell. um
Yeah.
I saw he tried the carnivore diet for a month or something, right? And I read
Right.
his I saw his, what was his Instagram or something, he was talking about it, took his shirt off, he was all jacked, chiseled, six pack, and he said something like, you know, I've been on it for 30 days, I had diarrhea for 2 weeks and now that's gone. And I feel great. I lost some fat around my midsection and I feel good, basically, is what he's saying. And we all know Joe Rogan. He's a big hunter. He's a big meat lover. Um, but he's also very objective. That's why we love Joe, because he's super objective. He's very, if it didn't work, he would say it. You know what I mean? So what, what's up with Joe Rogan, man? Let's talk. I mean, just, he went through it for 30 days and he said he felt awesome, but he said he had diarrhea for a few days. Is that just his body adjusting to the change, or what's that all about?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, so I'm going to reference this. So reposted Joe Rogan. He went carnivore for the World Carnivore Month in January. He lost 12 pounds. He said his energy really was like up here all day long. And then he would crash and sleep well. He had gut issues for the first 2 weeks. So I think his gut issues are just a shift in the flora, the
Mm,
gut microbiome. Also, you got to learn how to do it right, because you can eat a lot of animal foods, but still maybe not have the most um, tolerable types of animal foods. Some people don't do as well with chicken or pork, and it also depends on the sourcing and the quality. So, there's some nuances with the diet that can help and do that. But yeah, I think Joe Rogan is someone who has been a great sort of influence on the community in terms of what it's done for getting awareness out there. And he also had vitiligo, which is a skin condition where you have inconsistencies in the coloring and pigment of your skin, and it's believed to be an autoimmune disease. And he said his vitiligo had been the best he had ever experienced in terms of just clearing up. And so that's like another, like, what's going on here, right? Like
yeah.
your body is like not like messed up, and like you switch food and like all of a sudden like you don't have these reactions.
Yeah.
So again, it's the plant toxins. It's getting rid of what is in the plants because they don't want to be eaten. I love them. I have them all over me. Like I want to coexist with plants, and they provide a great value to us. They're great food for the animals I want to eat.
Mm,
But I want my plants to be healthy and providing me with clean air, and I want to live with them. But when it comes to eating them, I mean, again, I kind of alluded to this. It is a quality of life thing. If you love your salsa or you love your guacamole, like, part of what I talk about when I wrote my book was like, the subtitle of it is, it's an ancestral reset to optimal human health, which means, do it for 90 days, get your immune system and your body back to where it was probably designed. And then if you want to reintroduce your dark chocolate or your coffee, or you just love this food and the value of it outweighs the negative reaction it might cause you, or you do well with it and you can tolerate it, then you do you. So it's really kind of like, I want it to be there so people understand a lot of what's going on in their health is probably linked to just the chronic bombardment of these pesky molecules that have just evolved over hundreds of millions of years to allow these other animals on the earth to survive and thrive. And so, to your point about the vitamins, when you look at all the vitamins and the biochemistry of what we think of as these amazing foods in plants, it becomes very clear that we actually have to convert everything from plants. Almost every food source we get from plants has to be converted to an animal source. So for example, a lot of people talk about beta carotene. It comes from carrots or sweet potatoes, and it's a precursor for vitamin A, retinol. Well, guess what? Vitamin A is really important for eye health, brain health, nerve health. You need vitamin A in your diet. Like, you need really good vitamin A, because if you don't have that, you could have brain issues. You could even get permanent brain damage from deficiencies in vitamin A. So you need it. Where do you get vitamin A in animal foods? Well, you get it in the liver, you get it in the organs. Where do you store vitamin A in the human body? You store it in your eyes, in your brain. So if you eat the eyes of an elk, or the brain of a deer, or you eat the liver, you're going to get a ton of vitamin A. In fact, you get about 16 times the daily value of what you would need in about 4 ounces of beef liver. Just eating liver like 2 or 3 times a week, a few ounces. And the same is true for all the other vitamins. So when you think about vitamin deficiencies and where you're missing them in plants, plants form vitamin D2. Bodies in the human cannot use vitamin D2. They have to use vitamin D3. Where do you get that vitamin D3? Well, you actually synthesize it from sunlight, from ultraviolet B radiation in the sun, but you also can get it from egg yolks. You can get it from liver. You can get it in some of the organs where it's stored, again, in the animal biochemically. And that is in the form of vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 has to be converted. And the conversion on some of these, Aaron, is like 10. So for example, with retinol, I believe it's over 20-1. So 1 unit at 20 from a carrot versus 1 unit of retinol from liver is bioavailable at a 20th its value. So your body's going through this molecular stress of creating and converting and utilizing other nutrients to convert the actual nutrient, and it's not as bioavailable. And it comes with all these other plant toxins and anti-nutrients. Like, fiber, in my opinion, is pretty useless for humans. And it brings other things to it. So, all these vitamins are very interesting. In my book, just to kind of give you a basic list of some of the biggest ones I looked at, omega-6 versus omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-6 fatty acids, very inflammatory. Where do we get those? Nuts, seed oils. Those are plant form omega-6, are plant form fatty acids. There's a very small amount of ALA, which is the plant form omega-3 fatty acid, but your conversion rate on ALA to what you need it, which is EPA or DHA, is going to be like something like 15-1. Vitamin A, we talked about. Heme iron is another big one. Plants have iron, like spinach and things like that, but the bioavailability and all the oxalates and all the phytic acid and other anti-nutrients you get that strip your body from eating those foods is going to probably outweigh the benefits and the bioavailability from the plant. So heme iron, you get a ton of iron from liver. You get iron in the muscle meat of animals. You get it in blood if you drink blood.
Yeah, I see
So,
you.
not that everybody.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I've seen you chug. I've seen you chugging blood on your Instagram, and I was like, "Holy shit, this guy's all in." So,
Yeah,
you
I
just
mean,
drain it. You drain it from your steak bags, and you just chug that down like a shot, or what?
yeah, basically it tastes a lot like the meat. I mean, it's in the meat that you're eating. It's just in more concentrated form, and it's a fluid. But whatever drains out of the meat, I mean, to me, that's a lot of vitamins and nutrients and magnesium and minerals. And I don't have a
Yeah.
problem eating it as long as I know where the meat is coming from and I know it's fresh.
Mm.
So,
So
the blood will give you a lot of minerals and vitamins and magnesium.
makes sense. Yeah, magnesium for sure. Yeah. And so, I mean, talk about a rare steak. Like, this blood is not cooked or heated up or anything in any fashion, right? It's just straight up out of the bag, how it is, like that,
Yeah.
cold from
Yeah.
the
And again,
fridge.
I don't recommend, you know, not cooking your food, especially if you don't really know your farm. Like I eat from farms I've been to. I
Mm.
know what the land looks like. I've talked to the owner of the farm. So I absolutely know, like, and trust the quality of the food. So if you're doing that or you're hunting, like I think the last story I had, I went and hunted whitetail here in West Texas. I cut that deer open myself. I am drinking the blood from the same animal that I shot with my own rifle, that I cut. So for me, it's like, I don't know how much more carnivore you can get than that. And I don't want to waste that. That blood is valuable. Like the plasma, all the nutrients in there, that's like some of the richest nutrients you can get. So blood is great. We talked about D2, D3. I will mention a couple other ones because I think it's really important. K1, K2, vitamin K2 is really valuable. People who have deficiencies in K2 are shown to have cardiovascular disease. K2 is only found in animal foods. You cannot get K2 in plant foods. Why on earth would we say that plant-based diets are so healthy for us when they miss these key nutrients that we cannot get from them, and they have clear molecules that trigger our antioxidant systems and put our body in a state of stress? I don't buy it. We can talk about the complete essential amino acid profile. Literally nothing in the plant kingdom comes close to beef and eggs in terms of the complete profile of essential amino acids, which are essentially, there's I believe 9 essential amino acids that you need to complete protein and to make it bioavailable for a human to process that protein and to utilize it and to build muscle. And so, the closest thing we see in plant foods for the most part is going to be beans and some legumes and peas, but those have a bunch of problems with them. And soy is linked with a ton of issues around the phytoestrogens within soy. So soy disrupts our hormones, and there's a lot of issues with soy in the whole industry with how they create soy and the genetically modified aspects of it. Folate, that's another big one that comes mainly from animal foods. So
Wow.
that's my soapbox on nutrients for sure. There's nothing. One more thing I will say, because people will bring this up: vitamin C. Where do you get vitamin C in animal foods? And there's a couple things there. Vitamin C, if you look at the molecular structure of it, it's actually very interesting. It looks almost the same as a glucose molecule. So sugar and vitamin C, I think it's an oxygen-hydrogen bonded connection. That's the difference between the two. So when you go carnivore or ketogenic, for example, your body switches from running on glucose to ketones. Whenever you shift your physiology and you're running in a ketogenic aspect like carnivore, there's a lot of benefits that we think are happening. One, you're stimulating and activating genes that promote longevity. You're getting more stable energy. You're reducing oxidation damage in your body from the cost of running on sugar. You're also upregulating your hormone sensitivity. So a lot of people on the keto diet will see their thyroid hormone downregulate, and they might see their testosterone drop, and they might even see things like vitamin C levels being not as necessary at the levels that the RDA is listed at. So we don't really know where we stand with all of these, but when you don't have, for example, when you don't have a lot of insulin in your blood because you're not eating a lot of carbs or sugar, your insulin sensitivity goes up. And so that's like the opposite of being a diabetic. When you have a lot of sugar that you've been eating over decades or even years, your insulin sensitivity goes down and your body has to produce more of the hormone because your body just goes, I'm like fried. The circuits are fried. The sensitivity of your hormone receptors are just maxed out. And so you just have to start pumping yourself physically with insulin because you can't get enough of it out there for your body to respond to it. And so vitamin C, you get it in meat, you get it in liver. And what we think is the case is actually the amount of vitamin C you need on a carnivore diet, maybe even on a ketogenic diet, is a lot lower than we thought, because we've seen explorers in the Arctic in the 20s and 30s that they corrected their deficiencies in vitamin C simply by eating fresh meat. So fresh meat would essentially fix that. So I could talk more about vitamin C or whatever one of those things that jumps out at you, Aaron.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I got so many questions. It's ridiculous. Okay. So let's talk. I mean, Jesus, where do I even go from here? I have so many questions. I want to ask you a couple things about the vitamins. Let's just say vitamins, for example. Like I have my vitamins here, okay? My multivitamin that I take, and I have some fish oil here, I'm a big supplement eater, right? Maybe I've been brainwashed to do that. I don't know, but I eat supplements. I do drink my green smoothies and all that stuff. Okay. Now I'm starting to think I should just eat meat because this sounds awesome to me, and it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense to me. Okay, um, and I know that I love the feeling I get when I eat meat and stuff. It's great. So, are you eating dairy, eggs, yogurt, milk? Like, are you eating that kind of animal product as well? Cheese?
So I'll eat fish. I'll eat eggs. Although I just eat raw egg yolks for the most part. The whites are
The
generally,
opposite, right? You're the opposite of what most people are like. I just eat the whites. I don't eat the
yeah,
yolk.
conventional wisdom is like avoid cholesterol, right?
Yeah.
And don't let it get in your body. Um, so yeah, so dairy is not, I'm not a big fan of dairy. And I think that a lot of us are not designed to be drinking milk or any sort of milk substrate once we pass our infancy. And so when we look at our genetics and our ability to process casein and the proteins within dairy, most people are going to have an intolerance to it, and it's going to cause inflammation and an immunological response. So that sucks for a lot of people because dairy is in so many foods that people love,
Mm.
myself included. I will eat from time to time dark chocolate. So, I will say like that has been one of my biggest vices. And I started like reintroducing that like a few months ago, but it has problems. It's very high in oxalates, and we can talk about like what we talked about with spinach and kale. These are microscopic thorns. You have to be really careful with how much oxalates you consume because they can cause kidney stones. They can cause thyroid misfunction. They're not good. And so I'm weaning myself back off of it. And I kind of go in cycles and try different things, but um, I don't do supplements. I don't believe there's really that much value in them. That's my perspective. I think a lot of the fish oils out in the marketplace are going to be oxidized, which in my opinion is going to be much more destructive than beneficial to your overall health. And so I would encourage most people, if they're doing a fish oil, to reconsider and instead get grass-fed meat, because you're going to have the DHA and EPA in there. Eat bone marrow, make your own bone broth, and maybe do your own fishing. But
This is bone
things
broth.
like that.
Yeah, this is bone
Awesome.
broth. Yeah, my
Yeah.
I love it. It's awesome. Yeah, I yeah. I'm having such a paradigm shift here, man. Seriously, it's crazy. Okay, so supplements and stuff. Like when you look at like, okay, you mentioned On It earlier, right? So On It, we love On It. Onyx and Gall is awesome. I mean, not Onyx and Gall. What's his name? Aubrey.
Aubrey Marcus.
Yeah, awesome. Like, these dudes are just awesome dudes, right? Um,
Right.
On It has a shit ton of supplements, no?
Yeah, they do. And I don't really buy all of their supplement philosophy.
Mm,
Like for example, their flagship product that they have been kind of built off of is Alpha Brain. And Alpha Brain has some things in it that I think are pretty cool, like tyrosine, which is an amino acid, which for someone with my genetics can be beneficial because it helps with dopamine production. And so tyrosine is something you would get in meat, but you might boost it up for certain advantages potentially. And so, but the problem is Aubrey also has all these plants that he's big into with his whole psychedelic kind of following. And I'm actually a fan of psilocybin in medicine from plants, but I really wish they would make Alpha Brain without the plants, like the ashwagandha root and like these other rhodiola and like these other plants, because they're taking these plants and they're going, oh, they're giving you antioxidants or they're triggering this in your body. And it's like, yeah, they're doing that because your body is like getting bombarded with a plant toxin. It's like, look, if I want to get that, I'll just take a shot of whiskey or smoke a cigarette, and get the same effect. Like I'll produce glutathione. Like I don't want the stress. I just want the component that doesn't come with the toxicity. So it is a challenge. But what I like about them is they have a brand that focuses on really being fit. And so they have a gym here in Austin. They're based in Austin where I'm at. They have some mushroom stuff, which is interesting to me. Fungi are technically not even plants, although I think as I've dug further in the rabbit hole, they're also probably toxic to us. And
yeah.
so that's kind of hurt me because I'm like, oh man, you know, I've been interested in like Four Sigmatic and some of these like teas and cordyceps and lion's mane and chaga. We know chaga, for example, is high in oxalates. You don't want to eat those. So it kind of sucks because like you're taking it for your immune function, but you're getting bombarded with microscopic crystals that are they're just thrashing your molecular chemistry. So um,
Wow.
it's a nuance, you know, it's always tough, but at the end of the day, it's like, what were our ancestors doing? They were outside, they were getting sunlight, they were moving, they were eating meat. And that's what they were doing the majority of the time, man. They were eating the liver. Like, you want your multivitamin, that is your multivitamin. Start eating liver on a regular basis. You get everything you need and you don't get any of the nonsense that you don't want.
Yeah. I love liver. Love liver. It's one of my favorite parts of an animal. Um, Crazy, man. This stuff's crazy. I love it. Crazy in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Oh, so speaking of sunlight, okay, let's go there for a second.
Sure.
We all know sunlight's just awesome. I mean, I love sun gazing and getting out there and doing your thing. I see you in your Instagram stories, shirt off, downtown in the city, like Cro-Magnon man out there getting your sun, and people are driving by in their suits, and you're like, yeah, I'm just out getting my sun. And I'm like, this dude's on fire. It's awesome. You know, I love this shit. Um, but what is this red light thing you got going on in your house? What is that? Because that looks awesome. I want a piece of that action. You're in there sweating your ass off with these red lights. If you're not following on Instagram, what's your Instagram handle, by the way?
It's Karnivore Kurt with 2Ks.
Get in there and follow this dude on Instagram. It's awesome. It's a show, man. It's a show. So
Thank you.
he's inside this room, you know, shirt off, you know, probably with a sausage in your hand or something, and just blaring red lights on you, and you're sweating beans.
Yeah.
What is that? What are you doing there?
So light is a nutrient. I firmly believe that light is the ultimate life of this planet. And I also believe that it's not just a nutrient for plants, but it's actually a nutrient for us humans. And we see this because when we look at humans, we can directly see that there are mechanisms happening in our biology when we're exposed to full spectrum light. So, you know, I'm a fan of like some of these tools. I played around with different like Juve panels and sauna space. And if people really want to learn about red light, which is what you're kind of referring to, Aaron, they can go to my YouTube. I have a video on there and I've talked about the different red light panels and what they actually do and go into depth on the science. Okay. So for example, the red light panels, there's a couple different ones on the market now, but the idea here is that we have something called photobiomodulation. This is basically where we take light at specific targeted wavelengths, and we know that cells in our body produce energy using the electron transport chain. So our cells are powered by the mitochondria. The way that the Krebs cycle in the cell works is we actually create a gradient of electricity, just like a power turbine creates a difference in electrons, which makes voltage change. So that is how our cells generate energy. They're literally like little turbines in our cells that create this energy. And what happens is we have found certain wavelengths of light, specifically red and near infrared light in these red light devices that will penetrate the skin and hit the skin surface and provide energy to the cellular mitochondria. They're photons of light wavelengths at certain waves that hit the receptors in the mitochondria and give them power, just like a solar panel kind of charging up. It's not the same mechanism, but that's the kind of the high level analogy of it. And so when you put yourself in red light, you can help with joint pain, you can help stimulate repair, you're giving yourself energy, because a lot of disease and lack of recovery is due to just cellular dysfunction and our mitochondria just not having the adequate energy. So I have what's called a sauna space. It's an incandescent red light therapy device that's also a sauna. And so I get sauna and red light at the same time. I take my Kindle Oasis in there, which is waterproof, and I sweat all over that thing. And I read a book for like an hour, and it's just like a perfect, you know, kind of detox. And with where the world is right now, it's actually like a super win, you know? But I would say this, I would say that is great. But you know, what is really awesome is like living in the South where I am, because the sun and the full spectrum of light that we can get down here is almost year round. And so we can get UV ultraviolet, which is on the other end of the spectrum. You've got ultraviolet, violet, green, blue, and then you go to red, and then you go to near infrared. And so it's like the sun is like this. It's like a massive star. Most of the light actually is like green. That's like where a lot of the spectrum is. But then it's like on this far curve here, we have all of our ultraviolet, violet light. We know that ultraviolet A radiation, which I believe is 95% of the UV light that the sun will send to the atmosphere at the Earth's surface, is going to give us cardiovascular benefits. It has to do with vasodilation and nitrous oxide production. So if you get ultraviolet A radiation, go lay out on the beach, go down somewhere south for a vacation, you're kind of like just like so relaxed and like just opened up by like the sunshine, right? It's like the sun is hitting your skin, you're producing all this vasodilation, your cardiovascular system has so much resiliency from that. The other UV spectrum, UVB, your body produces vitamin D3, and that's your prohormone, which is not even technically a vitamin. It's actually a precursor to all your hormones, a lot of your biggest ones like testosterone, and it allows you to really boost up your immune system. And so, ultraviolet light for me is a big one. I try to get out in the sun every day, at least an hour. Here in Austin, I'll put sunblock or wear a hat to protect my face, so my face will look young even when I'm 100. But I don't mind it, being on my chest and my back and my legs, and that's really ultimately, I think, how we're going to live well, is by getting sunshine. It's such a valuable nutrient that people are lacking.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially nowadays. Like, I don't mean now because of this virus and stuff. I mean, just in general, people are cooped up inside, all this stuff. It's funny you mentioned the cardiovascular aspect of it. Now, correct me if I understand this wrong, but from my personal experience, I was telling you earlier, we used to live in Southeast Asia, right? Super sunny. It was a tropical paradise. I would run every morning between 5 and 15 miles. And it was just part of my morning routine. Go out with my dog, go for a run, sunrise, shirt off, that felt awesome. So good. Yeah. But my cardio was really good. Like I could do it with ease, let's say, and just going along pretty nice. Did that for many months back to back, couple years in a row. I ran that much, right? When I find myself going to, say, Canada or Europe, Russia, my wife's Russian, I go to these Nordic kind of places and I go for a run, I struggle. I really do. Now, is it because the air is dry and I'm like gasping I'm like, or does it have to do with something to do with the sun? Like, I'm just trying to think around what's going on there, because I notice it every time I go out of the tropics and go for a run. I'm a completely different human. I'm like, my God, I can barely do 4 miles. But yesterday down at the beach, I easily did 12. Is that what you're talking about? Like, am I on the right path here?
It could be. It could absolutely be. I mean, vasodilation, nitrous oxide, they're used for a lot of like pre-workouts, and they're used for a lot of athletic performance. So it absolutely could be that. It could be you're just, in a colder environment, you don't go outdoors as much. Maybe you're not as conditioned. Elevation is always a factor too. So, if you're at sea level, you're getting really thick, high oxygen quantities in what you breathe. So, you go to Denver or up into, the Rockies where you're at, you might be at a base elevation that the air is just thinner. And so your body has a more difficult time breathing and getting the oxygen it needs. And when you train at that level and you come back to sea level, it's so easy. You're just like, your heart and your body's just like primed for it. So it could be a number of factors.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. The altitude's definitely one. I noted back in the day, I was a alpine ski racer, chasing the Olympics in my early 20s and stuff. And that was my whole deal back in the day. And, when we would go to various places around the world, like I can very clearly remember, for example, Tignes, France, there's a ski resort called Tignes, and it's super high. Like, it's way up in the Alps. You got to take like 4 funiculaires to get there. And you do a run and it's like, oh my God, somebody give me oxygen, and then you come back and you ski in like Whistler or something, and you're just like a superhero. you know, or it's like these MMA guys that are training in Denver and then they go fight in Florida or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. So throughout this journey you've been on, because it's been quite the journey, how long have you been doing this carnivore for? And what would you say is the biggest transformation that's happened in your being that maybe you didn't foresee, or that kind of maybe shocked you the most?
I would say I started the carnivore diet September of 2018. So, we're coming up on a year and a half. The biggest shift I saw was gut issues by far. And the gut issues translated into anxiety and into pretty much everything. They say that the human gut is like the second brain or whatever, and that we have 100 million neurons in our gut. So when the gut is not healthy, where 3/4 of your immune system sits, and you're constantly bombarding it with food that just doesn't put it at ease, then that's really been there. And I can literally go and everything is predictable. Like I can eat breakfast. I know that I'm not going to feel like any weird things where, like when you go out to eat or you meet a friend and maybe you eat something and you're like, oh, you're bloated, or you're not really there. Like I was finishing my meal, like literally eating a steak right when I got on the phone with you, right before we started. Cause I was like in between a recording and I had to like whip it down. And it's like, dude, I just ate like a pound and a half of meat, a couple egg yolks, some fat, some kidney. And it's like, I'm here. I don't have any gut issues. I'm not bloated. I'm not feeling like I need to lay down to digest all that food. It's like, I'm ready to go. And so, that's been such a game changer for me. It's like, if you can function that way, like every day. And cause I used to do the superfood smoothies. I used to do kale, almond butter, cacao, cinnamon, chia seeds, like all the shit that Tim Ferriss and Dave Asprey and Rhonda Patrick and Joe Rogan, all those people talk about, like, get all your superfoods. I used to put those in there. You know what I would do? I would slam that smoothie with all the whey protein, and I would literally, and blueberries, and I'd have to like lay down for like an hour. I'd be like, oh, it wasn't necessarily like I had gut pain, but it was like I was done for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and now I can knock down a breakfast. I feel amazing. I'm still productive for the next few hours. Of course, I'm human. I need to rest. And so what I'm actually writing my second book, Aaron. It's on energy. And
Nice.
I'm debating whether or not I'm going to combine it, because I've already written a guide on light. And this second book, I'm pretty much finished with writing it if it's going to be only on sleep. And so sleep is such a fascinating topic to me. And we spend a third of our lives there, and there's some really big things we can do to move the needle on that and become more consistent ancestrally. But energy, it's like, okay, I'm moving my workouts in my day to different times, and I'm finding that like it gives me more of my evening back when I'm more kind of, again, intellectual, and I'm trying to like kind of fit in to allow myself to do the most out of my day that I want to do. And it's just interesting to play with all that. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's so damn interesting. You know what I find interesting about you is that you're obviously very well researched on a lot of all these topics, right? Like clearly you spend a lot of time learning about this stuff, right? You're very switched on with it all. And it doesn't surprise me that you went through the whole superfood thing, right? Like it makes sense to me. You're trying to optimize your life. You're an optimizing type human, right? You're like, I'm optimizing my sleep. I'm optimizing my health. I'm doing this with the meat. I'm doing that with the superfoods. Like you're an optimizing type dude. Obviously your businesses thrive. I'm sure you're exactly the same way there with your running ads for people or doing all your business stuff. Like you optimize shit. You're an optimizer. So when I see an optimizer who's sparkling like you, I'm like, well, what the fuck's working? Like, what's the most optimum thing? Like you've done it all, it seems like, and you're landing on meat and light and sleep. And it just sounds so damn logical to me. And cold plunges. Like I saw your Instagram yesterday. You're in some cold river. I'm like, yeah, cold plunge. I Hoffman. It's legit, that stuff. I feel amazing when I do cold dunks and cold showers.
You probably have access to cold, like natural cold up there.
Yeah,
Like
right now
we
I'm beside a cold ass river right this second. Yeah.
Dude, you
You
should
want
jump in that every night or every afternoon. You should jump in there. Just, I'm telling
totally.
you, like,
Yeah, you're right.
that's incredible. I'm jealous because
Yeah.
I just don't have it. It's already 90 down here. It's like, it's getting hot, you know?
Uh,
So, but we have a facility here in Austin where I can go. They have a cold tank. It's like 48. And so, you know, it's cold enough. You can definitely feel it. It
totally.
works.
So yeah, let's talk about that real quick, and then I'll let you go. I want to be respectful of your time here. What's the cold all about, man? What's up with the cold plunges and stuff? What's that do for the human body?
So it's kind of crazy. I don't know if I'm stuck in this like, you know, silo where I don't see the outside. But to me, it's like all about ancestral alignment, right? What did our ancestors do? They experienced levels of discomfort from time to time, and they probably walked through some cold rivers and swam in some cold lakes. And so when we look at like what happens in the human body when we put ourselves in cold exposure, like the whole Wim Hof thing, like it's pretty amazing. Like it triggers our body's glutathione production, which is the most powerful antioxidant we have without putting our guts on war. You know, like it doesn't give us some sort of toxicity or break our gut barrier or cause leaky gut or damage DNA. It just goes, oh shit, we're under siege here. Let's trigger some antioxidant protection in our body and flush the blood flow through us. And so there's, you know, what I find it really helps with is deep sleep and physical recovery. And so I do cold plunges largely for that. It's great for stress, for depression. There's plenty of studies out there about it. I find it also is a mental thing. It's never comfortable. And when I can condition myself to consistently do it, I'm just more, I'm more of a warrior, if you will, you know, at other things. And so I'm into that because of that.
Mm, yeah, it yeah, you're proving your discipline to yourself, and you're more of a badass because you can consistently put yourself in that uncomfortable position. But yeah, what popped out there for me is it triggers your body into oh shit mode. I'm going to produce some stuff. I'm so scientific. It's going to produce some stuff that's going to make me awesome, right? Like that's what it does. It clicks you into
Yeah.
like oh shit mode, and your body's like boom, turn on the switch, and it produces all these things that you need when you're in oh shit mode. So you're forcing your body to like do that, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do
I
you
mean,
recommend? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, scientifically, you could just say it's called environmental hormesis. And that just means it's an environmental hermetic, an environmental stressor, where a lot like exercise, like when you do some stress, but you don't like destroy yourself, like it's a good thing. Your body can be resilient to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like, I mean, an analogy would simply be going to the gym and pumping weights, pushing weight around, you're tearing your muscles, but that makes your muscles build more. Like you have to tear it to build it. Like you just have to. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool, man. All right, man. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I could literally talk to you for hours, but I'm not going to hold you here all day. I know you got a lot of stuff to do. You probably got to make a steak or something at this point. So it's been a real pleasure, man. I've enjoyed our conversation so much, and thank you so much for being
Likewise, man.
here. So
Yeah.
for the listeners and the viewers who want to check out your book, check out you on social media and stuff, watch you do some shots of blood like I do and all this stuff, where can they find you, man?
So I'm focused on Instagram at Karnivore Kurt. Oh, K with a carnivore and Kurt with a K. Just one word at Karnivore Kurt. We have a YouTube where we're doing pretty well. We're at like 3,500 subscribers now. We put out videos twice a week. I've got a team of editors and people that help me with that. And that's Karnivore Kurt for YouTube. And then my book, which is kind of like my baby. I would appreciate anyone who's interested in this or likes what I have, go buy a copy. And you can get that at Opti-Align. So OPTI Align, ALIGN.com. That's our kind of parent company /book. So Opti-Align/book, Opti-Align.com/book is where our book is. And I can send you all the links, and they're all in our social anyway. So yeah, learn more about it at Instagram day to day. And then YouTube is where I kind of put out the content about all kinds of topics like this.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, go check him out on Instagram, man. It's a riot. I love it. You're one of my favorite dudes to watch because you're just doing hilarious shit. It's awesome. Hilariously healthy shit. But it's like, man, the guy's chugging blood and sitting in a sauna room talking about like sleep. It's like, yeah, this is awesome. You know, it's just cool shit. All right, man. Kurt, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, man. And thanks so much for hopping on the Growth Podcast here today.
Thanks, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure here as well.